It is my true privilege to introduce our opening keynote today from someone I have such deep affection for and whose work I respect and never tire of watching. Bo McGuire was born the queer son of a Waffle House cook and his third shift waitress in Hoax Bluff, Alabama, which for those of you who aren't aware is in the northeast corner of the state, a really beautiful area with lots of hills and creeks, and it sits in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I had the pleasure of driving through there this past fall and couldn't help but think about how this landscape must have shaped Bo and other artists in that region. Bo says the first movie that he truly fell for was the music video for Reba McEntire's Fancy, which for the uninitiated who haven't experienced the glory of this short film, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for you to check out at your leisure. Bo was a Ryan Murphy and a Half Initiative mentee and one of Filmmaker Magazine's 25 New Faces of Independent Film. We were proud to showcase his short film, the fantastically titled Socks on Fire, Uncle John and the Copper-Headed Water Rattlers at the 2018 New Orleans Film Festival. And it was during this festival that I first met Bo in person. I'd obviously seen his work, which features him in it, and to be quite frank, did not believe that such a larger-than-life personality could be real. But after hanging out with him over the course of the festival, I came to know him as an old soul, totally genuine, without an ounce of pretense in his body. I recall him saying during that week, quote, "This is not an act. I have always been like this." Bo's feature debut, called simply Socks on Fire, won the Grand Jury Prize for Best Documentary Feature at the 2020 Tribeca Film Festival and premiered internationally in the Luminous section at IDFA last year. The film was selected as part of the Cinema Eye Honors Stay Focused initiative and was nominated for an IDA Award for Best Writing. His original television pilot, called Shitbird, was selected by Spike Lee to receive the Sandra Ifremova Award, and his feature script, Alabama Snipe Fight, appeared on NYU's Purple List. He belongs to the First Church of Dolly Parton, and Bo, I really hope that your keynote will address how one gains membership into such a congregation. And he is the only person whose love of Crystal Gayle matches my own. Please join me with some virtual hand claps to welcome Bo McGuire to present our opening keynote entitled It Still Needs a Title, Reimagining the South in Mariah Carey's Heels. Take it away, Bo.
Oh, that's so nice. And I have to tell everyone that's listening, this is the initiation into the First Church of Dolly Parton. So welcome to your initiation. It's so wonderful to be with y'all on this Wednesday. I'm humbled to be asked. Thank you, Zandashay and Clint and Fallon for putting this together, and to Lynn for pulling all the technical strings behind the scenes. And thank all of y'all for being here out there in the Zoomosphere. I do have to start out by saying it's a particular honor to be asked by the New Orleans Film Society to give this keynote, because when my film, Socks on Fire, was in its nascent stages in the form of the Fever Dream short, the festival programmed it and set me up with industry meetings. And it was at one of those industry meetings that I first met the great Leah Giblin of the Centereach family, a person well known for her knowledge of every holler-like cranny in New York City. And that meeting with Leah led to the first grant we received for the film. So if for no other reason, I'm just here to say that miracles come in the form of meetings and miracles do come true. And I'm not just saying this to make New Orleans Film Society shine. I know we're here to celebrate and illuminate the greater Southeast region, but I'm shining on them in the spirit of Mariah Carey, who, yes, crowns our time together today. Mariah believes in celebrating the people who have marked your life. And on that note, about the title of this talk, as you know, it's called It Still Needs a Title, Reimagining the South in Mariah Carey's Heels. And I must confess, I wrote the title before this talk completely revealed itself to me. So if at any point it feels that I am making associative leaps, please understand that in a previous life, I was a poet. Simply roll with it, drift at your leisure. For in the words of Mariah, this is a moment, darling. As I looked over the fascinating topics presented at the summit, I wondered what I might bring to the feast that could resonate across and amongst the variety offered. Seeing as how everyone has come to this space with some relationship to the South, I thought this concept of the South as a region, Southern as an identity, was as good a place to start good a place as any to start the conversation. Being solely in Alabama over the past year, I have been wondering a great deal about what it means for creative thinkers and makers to identify or disidentify as Southern. I myself often locate my urge to create in the labor of searching out Southern stories that buck the knee-jerk go-to narratives that paint this place as only hateful and completely closed to different ways of being, a place any reasonable and loving person would flee from. That kind of lens invites a binary that my queer, country, and creative self resists. The South I know requires a more nuanced approach, something that resembles the inside of a kaleidoscope, that unsettling, ever-changing brightness, the roll of the sharp edges, the garish colors bordering on the grotesque. That's how I feel about where I come from. And on that note, I want to say that when I say the South, I say it with the acknowledgement that the South as a region, as an identity, is fraught with tension. It's bedrocked in a shameful past, and it operates in contradiction and paradoxical energy. The term, like the landscape, is multifaceted. It shifts and moves, and it's moody. So when I call out to the South, please know that in that utterance is also the knowledge that the concept of a Southern identity could very well be better left in history. But because on this day, at this moment, I locate the roots of the kind of storytelling I'm trying to create so directly in the people who raised me and in the hollers my ancestors roamed, and I also locate it in my queerness, this is the razor raw landscape I choose to wander. And as a wanderer of this terrain, I bear witness to how the pressures of being different in a place like the South can also produce a magic, how the stereotypical notions of this place can be broken open by experience, how the lessons of this place are necessary in turning us towards a stance more invested in creation and breaking new ground, a way of being that allows better access to realized wild dreams. And that is why the title of this talk is It Still Needs a Title. I believe whatever I am trying to offer up here about being a Southerner and being a queer artist and a human being here in this region still needs a name. The language is still lava hot and forming. It is not an easy place to be, but I believe it is the only place to be. You see, I believe that Southerners, because of our problematic past and our proximity to the lived experiences caught within that past, are the very people most equipped to put language and ideas towards a way forward that can acknowledge the pain of the past, locate the wisdom that has been cultivated here, and then transform the future of this place. For me, my Southernness makes me want to dig in and tell all the stories untold that I see rolling beneath the all too well-known veneer of the South. Part of what I have always found frustrating about telling these stories, about being a Southern art maker in general, is the fact that there was never any blueprint for how to do it, how to make it happen, to use a Mariah lyric. So as an offering of a blueprint for how we, as art makers and creative thinkers, might access the possibilities of where we come from, I thought I might present to you my work and identify the ways in which it got made that I think of as Southern. That is, I will tell you the lessons I used in creating that I locate directly in my experience as a queer creative person in the sometimes cruel geography of small town Alabama. Now, what does this have to do with Mariah Carey, the elusive chanteuse? Well, perhaps not very much at all, and by not very much at all, I mean everything. You see, I can trace the power in being different I sense as a young, effeminate Judy Garland belting boy in Alabama to many different female figures. In fact, anyone who knows me knows that usually when I talk about where I come from and a set of hills, I'm talking about Dolly Parton. But for me, before there was Dolly, there was Reba. And right before Reba, there was a brief and strong Mariah moment in which I remember silently desiring a Mariah-themed birthday party. In any case, Mariah has been in my mind and in my heart lately. I don't know if any of y'all have read The Meaning of Mariah Carey, but I highly recommend it. It is truly a good memoir, and anyone here who second guesses that Mariah is a bona fide American genius would be well served to get their hands on a copy. Anyhow, at some point in my youth, there was this commercial on MTV when MTV felt subversive to my then CMT specific soul, in which Mariah appears, I believe, in a dress and definitely in heels in the middle of a filled pool, musing about the struggle of making it, of being Mariah, of letting the feeling of being doubted as an outsider fuel her direction. This commercial shook me to my core. It unlocked something in me. Beautiful, polished Mariah was presenting another conflicting narrative of herself. The lonely underbelly tale of how you get to be so glamorous that you can walk in heels in a hotel pool. The commercial echoed a feeling of aloneness I felt, and it offered an alternative to it. Here in this pool, Mariah presented the possibility of transformation, a reward for going it your own way, a power that offered the audacious wisdom of wet stilettos. And it's from those heels and that pool that I am speaking to you as a self-professed Southerner today. And it's that subversive, transgressive power developed by merely existing inside the borderlands of a place that I'm talking about. I know I share that power with other people who are echoing in and from this place. It is also not lost on me now that that commercial, filmed in black and white, and save for the water and Mariah's voice, oh so quiet, was a highly cinematic moment. It marks an early moment of understanding how a moving image could call to an emotion I hadn't found expressed anywhere else. And Mariah has followed me in this kind of way throughout my life. In fact, when I applied to the film program at NYU with no knowledge of filmmaking whatsoever, I listened to Mariah sing Make It Happen on repeat. And that is how I learned that that 90s self-empowerment anthem is actually a spell for manifesting dreams. So Make It Happen gets us to NYU, which gets us to my creative work as a filmmaker, which gets us to my first feature, Socks on Fire. And it is in the making of Socks on Fire that I will conjure up this blueprint of my own experiences rooted in Mariah's heels. Now, I call Socks on Fire a transgenerational docudrama. It's a love letter to the Alabama women who raised me and saved me, but that love letter is couched in the battle over my grandmother's estate. Growing up, my mother's mother, my nanny, had the only history I was interested in. Her ghost stories, her cornbread, her lipstick-stained cigarettes, they were a legacy I longed to inherit. However, because Nanny refused to write a will when she died, all hell broke loose as my homophobic Aunt Sharon, my favorite childhood relative, by the way, schemed control of Nanny's estate, locking my drag queen Uncle John out of the family home. And I'm sure you're thinking about your own family drama right about now. And I think of Socks on Fire as a documentary of how I feel about where I come from. It's the story of the place told through the particularities of my family. It's a tale of loving a place that does not always love you back. I must tell you now that the film is quite a wild animal. It involves grainy family VHS footage, heightened Beyonce-inspired reenactments, traditional documentary-style interviews, poetic voiceovers, behind-the-scenes handycam footage, and direct addresses to the camera from yours truly as I narrate the terrain. Most of all, in Socks on Fire, I wanted to do the labor of queering the South. And to do that, I started by getting Uncle John in drag and placing him in front and center on Nanny's front porch. Now, this first clip I'm going to show is from the opening movement of the film as I arrive back to Nanny's house and unleash the whirlwinds of my queer imagination. So sit back and settle in as it lingers in establishing the world, the visual languages and textures in the film, and it sets our characters and all their variations into motion as well. So Lynn, if you'll play that first clip. All right, when I watch this opening, what comes to mind immediately is the concept of what I call skillful will, an imaginative power that is developed through the conditions of not having much. It's the art of working with what you have to create the most poignant result possible. Skillful will is that magic Dolly Parton employs when she talks about using burned match ends for mascara and berries for blush as a child in order to look on the outside the way she felt on the inside. It's the magic I watched both Mama and Nanny perform as they created beautiful home spaces and tablescapes with hand-me-downs and country cooking. They paired their natural eye for design and color with a farmer's sense of practicality. What strikes me also now is just how much we worked out of necessity to make Socks on Fire. At NYU, I had a narrative script, but no way to finance it, and the program was at the point of graduating me without use of the thesis equipment. So I had that pressure combined with the pressure of my tight-knit Alabama family unraveling. Not to mention that the latter had me keenly aware that I was losing the people and the places that made me me without having gotten them on camera. That's when, fueled by the frustration of not knowing any way I could help Mama and Uncle John, I picked up the camera and pointed it at them and at me. And I decided to make a record of Nanny's legacy that existed outside of my Aunt Sharon's obsession with being the administratrix of Nanny's estate. And that record eventually became what is known today as Socks on Fire. This negotiating an opportunity out of necessity and precarious, uncertain situations, that feels very Southern to me. As a queer Southerner, my very existence has been at times a precarious situation. And yet in my life and in my art, I seek to make that tension productive and not reductive. And it is from that perspective that I was allowed to see this opportunity to document my family. The question was, how can I not allow this to reduce me? And the answer was to get bigger. But beyond just this feeling of a nagging necessity, we were constantly employing skillful will on set and in the edit. I see it in the way we emphasize the already existing VHS footage. I see it in the way we used brilliant local actors. Everyone cast in Socks on Fire was either a friend or a friend of a friend. And speaking of friends, I can see, especially in the shot through the house, every member of the crew, talent to the gills, working their fingers to the bone in both the cold and in the heat, not for the money, certainly not, but because of the joy and the adventure of breaking new ground. I see skillful will enacted in the fur coat, a nod to the music video for Reva's Fancy I wear as I enter into the liminal space of Nanny's house. When we couldn't find a good coat, my producer Tatiana brought her Lebanese grandmothers from Toronto. That is to say, everything you see arranged before you was already within reach and readily available. Not to mention that the entire time we made Socks on Fire, we all lived out of my house and ate food Mama cooked. Now, this next clip starts off in an interview with my godmother as we further explore the actions and intentions of Aunt Sharon. When I ask why she went after John, the she in that sentence is Aunt Sharon, which introduces the brilliant performance of Birmingham actor Chuck Duck, who in drag plays Aunt Sharon. In this clip, we move from the reenactment into an incredibly special behind the scenes moment in which Chuck talks about queer Alabama nightlife. So Lynn, if you'll play clip 2. All right, now I wanted to show this clip for more than a couple of reasons. First off, you don't see much of it here, but Chuck Duck gives one of the high camp performances of the 21st century as Aunt Sharon. And I have to admit, Chuck had that camp sensibility when he came to the project. I just encouraged him to run around with it on fire. But also in this moment, Chuck does something directly that I was trying to do indirectly. He speaks to a queer South that is alive and well and refuses to be rooted only in pain and abandonment. Chuck never seeks permission to relate the story while the camera is rolling, and why should he? This is a documentary after all. Besides that, if we had ever operated on the traditional terms of permission on the film set, Socks on Fire would have never existed. And this notion of operating outside traditional methods, everyone's bodily and emotional safety accounted for, of course, in the name of good making, that feels especially Southern. Mama taught me from a young age that to seek permission is to court denial, and maybe this is akin to what Thoreau calls civil disobedience in filmmaking. I'm not sure. I learned how to make do and make good from my mama and Carson McCullers. Further, this moment also performs the concept of skillful will in an entirely different way. We just happened to be testing the camera while Chuck was getting ready, and when our cinematographer, Matt Clegg, realized that the conversation that was about to happen, he, along with our gaffer, Sean, immediately started filming it without direction. As Chuck presents a different way of being in Alabama, the film presents a different way of seeing than what was previously established in the film, in a moment that was never planned to be captured in the first place. And this is what I mean when I talk about breaking new ground in documentary. But beyond skillful will, what we got here was because we were willing to do what I like to call orchestrate with glory. That is, the willingness to experiment with how you capture what you want to capture. When you're making a movie, it's impossible to get every single thing that you want on film, and what you miss can break your heart. However, this openness to finding glory in an undetermined field of heartbreak, that seems to me to be of Southern descent. And one last thing I want to point out here that I'll go to a bit deeper in a later clip is the notion of hospitality rooted in Southern identity. If our entire team, 95% of us Southeastern, by the way, had not led with this kind of approach, we would have never created an environment in which Chuck felt comfortable enough to express what he expresses. As you can see, the moment exists in our morning coffees, inside our friendly chatter as we get ready for the day. Now, our next clip speaks to this vibrant queer Southern life that Chuck Duck so boldly presents, and it also speaks to the pain of being misunderstood by that vibrancy. In it, we move from a conversation with my mother when we talk about the period of time in which Aunt Sharon and I stopped being close. Mom equates it with my growing closeness with Uncle John and thereby the queerness that we share in common. And that fact ushers in a brief history of Uncle John's drag character, Suzanne Twiggy Michaels. So Lynn, if you'll play clip 3, please. All right, here I see the very Southern phenomenon of holding contradiction while still remaining whole. This movement is a performance of queer joy and the fun and self-invention, but it is also rooted in the pain of the loss of Aunt Sharon as a transformative figure in both of our lives. Uncle John also, as he tells us about coming to drag later in life, introduces what RuPaul calls stick-with-itness, the ability to see your dreams through even when the world refuses to shine a light on you. And while I realize that perseverance is not strictly a Southern way of being, I think Southerners of any kind of difference are forced to accept it as a condition of existence. This idea of sticking with it carries over into the music featured here. When Bonnie Raitt declined to let us use her version of John Prine's Angel from Montgomery, I refused to give up on the perfection that is that song as Uncle John's drag anthem. I searched and pleaded along with our music supervisor until we found Tanya Tucker's version. I learned later that John Prine actually sings in the background vocals of this track, and now his vocal imprint forever exists in the land of burning socks because we stuck with our inner Mariah knowingness. So for my final clip, I'd like to introduce y'all to some of the ladies I credit with raising me. We start with Miss Sherry Young, my 5th grade social studies teacher, as I try to explain what exactly it is that I'm doing, showing up at her front door with a camera and a microphone. So Lynn, if you'd play that last clip 4, please. I showed this clip because I felt it was best to end in honor of the women who teach us, protect us, and enlarge and enlighten the way we see the world. The women you've met here allow me to trace a Southern lineage all my own against the traditional patriarchal option. I wanted to end our exploration of the making of Socks on Fire with the story of the clip in which all the women walk through a field towards the camera. We were shooting in prime summer thunderstorm season in Northeast Alabama, and I had called all these women together just as the rain began to pour and we were completely without cover. Faced with the present danger of having all the beautiful pastel outfits and perfectly coiffed hairdos ruined, Roberta Reeves yelled out that she had a key to the church fellowship hall down the road in which we could take cover. By the time the storm passed, our chances of using a big bucket truck for the shot were dashed and our sunlight was running out. But instead of giving up, Matt and I planned the shot you just saw in collaboration with the ladies, their feet caked with mud in a matter of minutes. To this day, I believe it's the jewel of the whole movie, and it's because we stuck with our idea as much as it's because of the generosity and hospitality of the women themselves. Not to mention that by not giving in to the storm, I was personally blessed as I escorted my high school secretary, Judy Robertson, to her place in the field. I thanked her for all those times she had covered for me in high school, and the good Lord knows there were plenty. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I did it because I love you. Thank you for doing this. It means the world to me and to us." And for better or worse, this moment is where I leave you with teary-eyed Judy Robertson in the middle of a wet Alabama field in the heights of July. This is the edge of the blueprint. This is where you have to consider where your blueprint rhymes with mine and where it doesn't. By all means, challenge my blueprint and make it better. I've offered it up to all of you so you might consider what is distinct about your individual narratives in relation to the South. What lessons can be gleaned by your own existence in this place and your relationship to it? How can we put those lessons to good use? I'm not talking about bootstrap theory. In fact, I stay acres away from that. I'm talking about following your inner voice, honed by your individual experiences in this landscape, in order to refine your creative approach to thinking and to living. Too often, the story of creative thinkers in the South is one of leaving this place. I want to fight with the might of Nanny against that. If the story we tell ourselves about the South is that we need to leave it, that it's too far gone, that it's too problematic, then who will stick around and speak for those of us who exist here despite feeling like outsiders? Who will do the work to transform it, to reflect the richness that can be found here? Who will tell Uncle John's story, and who will see it? Who will see mine, and who will bear witness to yours? And I'll just close with my Dolly Parton plug here and say that if y'all liked what you saw in Socks on Fire, You're lucky. Not many people have seen footage for this film, from this film. So you can go and follow us on Instagram at Socks on Fire Film, or you can follow me at The Saints They March. And to stay tuned to find out how you might see it in some holler near you. And that's just to say, we have big plans for this spring, summer, and fall to do in-person events throughout the Southeast and the greater United States in a safe and loving and fanciful, fantastical way. So I hope to see y'all there. And thank y'all very much. Have a wonderful damn day.